Recorded live at Talks and Tasting Studios, it's the Clerical Errors Podcast, the podcast that shows you what's behind the collar. Let's go.
From the Talks and Tasting Studios, this is the Clerical Errors Podcast, the podcast that shows you
what's behind the collar.
This is Bollhagen.
This is Berg.
And this is Vicar.
Peter's here.
Hey, Pete.
We are doing a quick episode. It's busy time. It's Monday. We got a lot going on.
Yeah, today's the Annunciation.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Good call. Good call.
I do what I can.
Yeah.
I wouldn't
9
say I'm a
months.
hero.
It's Christmas. Yeah. That's how that works, Vicar.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
I've been told.
Hey, I've got this, just to get this out of the way before we get to serious Easter stuff, right?
Okay.
Can I just get rid of my speed top 12 list?
You want to get rid of it?
Just, yeah.
Okay,
like,
for the
literally,
listener,
you were here. I literally wrote this in a minute and a half, so.
Yeah.
he sat down, he wrote a bunch of stuff, he made us wait, and he's like, all right, got it, let's go.
All right, this is my speed top 12 list. Peter, play the intro.
Enough nonsense. It's time for Bollhagen's Top 12.
All right, you ready, Vicar, for my numbers?
Is it a true top 12 or is it 13?
It's top 12.
Okay. You ready?
I will have a couple of honorable mentions, but I'll announce those.
Okay.
So this is a time of year. What do people do? They fill plastic Easter eggs with stuff, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Normally it's what? Jelly beans, right? Or
Yeah.
maybe
Or
malted
some
milk.
kind of like hard candy, yeah.
Right. So I have the top 12 options, things that you can put in your Easter eggs other than those things.
To kind of spice things up.
Yeah. All right, let's go.
Number 12.
A young egg that's smaller so it'll fit in a regular plastic egg.
Number 11.
Fortune cookies.
Number 10.
Creatine.
Number 9.
Fortune cookies. I had that one twice. Keep going.
Number 8.
Stamps for sending us an angry letter.
Number 7.
Riff on that sticker.
Number 6.
Yes.
SARS-CoV-2 spike protein.
Number 5.
Love.
Number 4.
Nuts from Aldi. I love Aldi's.
Number 3.
Emergency communion kit.
Number 2.
SD card with the entire Clerical Errors podcast library.
Number 1.
Pope tweets. Honorable mention. Anthrax. And, I can't read that. What does that say? What does that say? I mean, underneath anthrax.
Did you... in the middle of that, you absolutely said Aldi's nuts, and
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you did. You said I love Aldi's nuts.
No, I was very careful. I said nuts from Aldi's, and I said I love Aldi's. Roll it back.
Got him.
I can't read it.
I have no idea what it says. It looks like children's comb, but I don't know. What
Is
it
that
means.
your last...
A children's message.
Oh, children's
Oh,
message.
That's right. Okay, that's all.
I like how half of them were just things that already contain other things.
You got like a
Like
Russian
an egg that
nesting
has an
doll of
egg,
Easter eggs.
or a fortune cookie.
All right. So there it is.
That was awesome. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter. I said nuts from Aldi.
Oh, boy.
All right. It's Easter.
It's Easter.
So, enough nonsense. We're not even drinking any beverages. We're just ready to go.
Yeah. Speaking of Easter, the text that we will be reading is John chapter 20. Now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early, while it was still dark, and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." So Peter went out with the other disciple, and they were going toward the tomb. Both of them were running together. But the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. And stooping to look in, he saw the linen cloths lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb. He saw the linen cloths lying there, and the face cloth which had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen cloths, but folded up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also went in, and he saw and believed. For as yet they did not understand the scripture, that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples went back to their homes. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb, and as she went, she stooped to look into the tomb. And she saw 2 angels in white sitting there, the body of Jesus sitting where the body of Jesus had lain, one at the head and one at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." Having said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and that he had said these things to her.
So, if a pastor is listening to this episode comes out at 5 a.m., you probably have an hour to write this sermon, so good luck. Good luck.
Ah,
So, lots of things you can obviously say about it. One of the things is to just talk about the basics of what the resurrection means.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a few of the main points. One is the resurrection means that the Father accepted the sacrifice for our sin. It also shows that we can trust his word, right? Because he said he would, and all of God's prophets said this was going to happen and explained this would happen. And if you're going to listen to anyone, you would listen to the one who died and rose, especially when he says that you too will rise from the dead. It says words like, "I am the resurrection and the life." Another thing it reminds us is that because Jesus rose, we too shall rise, meaning that, the example I like to give is how often in your lifetime have we gone to the moon, Vicar?
In my lifetime?
Yeah.
None.
Why?
Supposedly it's because we lost the technology.
Oh, of course you would say that. You're an old soul. Everything days is worse.
Sorry to burst your bubble.
Yeah. I think it is because we just wanted to show that we could do it, right? Right. Because we still say we can send a man to the moon, but,
But why haven't we?
Right. Right. So, but the point is, it just takes one for us to say that we can do it, right?
Exactly.
How many times does it take for someone to die and rise before we know it can happen again? Just once.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened. It shows that Jesus is a son of God who has defeated sin, death, and the devil. So those are some kind of main things that you can focus on in this. I think there's some interesting discussion, too, about the rest in the tomb. I actually wrote about this for one of my radio devotions for the Saturday, is that the rest in the tomb is kind of important, too, because, one, it shows that he really was dead, right?
Mm-hmm.
If there was no rest in the tomb, people would say, "What? Are you sure?
It wasn't a real death.
He's not dead yet."
Just
right?
in a coma, right?
Right. But the other thing is, when we talk about being dying with Christ and rising with Christ, I think that also goes with the rest in the tomb, that we rest with Christ in the grave. So, any thoughts on that rest of the tomb? It sounds like something you would be interested in, Berg.
yeah, I actually did a paper on this a long time ago, and this actually has to do with Luther's 1541 Supputatio Annorum Mundi, the calculation of the ages of the world. And here he's breaking down the world's timeline, and it's got everything from biblical events to other secular events like the sacking of Rome by the Goths and the birth of Muhammad. And he actually breaks down the world's age into 6 different days, 6 millennia of years. And when he's talking about this, he actually cites this text when he says, "Just as the 3 days of the death of Christ were not completed," and then there's a chart detailing the 3 days in the tomb, "in the shining morning on Sunday, it was not complete, but in the morning he rose. It is evident or clear that Christ rose in the midst of the 3rd day. As in the midst of the 1st day, death, hell, and the devil were made captive, now it proceeds in the midst of the 6th millennium." So even though there were 500 years left in the 6th age, Luther was confident that Christ would actually cut that time short, because Christ didn't spend the full 72 hours in the tomb, and so Luther reasoned Christians would be ushered into glory before the 6,000th year, which I is a very nice thought, right? That God is going to cut this suffering short, just as he rose early in the morning. I think, too, for us, Jesus rose early in the morning. Maybe we Christians should, too, right?
I mean, that's why we have church on Sunday, right?
Yeah.
But, I mean, why does he rise early in the morning? He gets to work, right? He has completed redemption, and now he takes up his divine power and majesty and glory fully and completely and works because it's finished. And if it's finished for us, then we too can go about with the confidence that, hey, you know what? We shouldn't waste the time, but we should actually, use it. We should redeem it.
There's always that urgency in his preaching, isn't it? The kingdom of God is at hand. There's always that urgency. Maybe he did it just so that we pastors have to get up early for the sunrise service. Maybe that was it too. That's way of his condemnation against my top 12 list.
Berg, that 6,000 year thing, is that something that is like hotly debated, or is that a quote unquote big deal, or is that kind of just a pet theory from Luther?
He actually wrote this, and it hasn't been translated yet. I should really go back and translate it, and because I think it's good for us to see, how did he calculate the age of the world? What did that look like? Why does he put, he says that the sixth age, or the 6,000th year, starts in the year 1000, and this is really the time of when the Antichrist comes forth and the like. So, I think it's very interesting. I think it's something that we should think about, because Luther viewed history as the way in which the gospel has fared among us. And it's something that we should actually look at. I mean, Luther wrote this to teach people. And whether we agree with it or not, it's good to see the theological underpinnings behind it. So,
And wouldn't you say, Berg, that most good theologians say it's got to be soon anyways? Because there is that constant anticipation it could be today.
Yeah, I mean, all throughout his writings, Luther thought that the end of the world was going to happen. But I think what is interesting about that is that what does he do? Does he tell his followers to sell everything like the Millerites did?
No.
Before the Great Disappointment, as it was called in the mid-19th century? No, of course not,
No.
Right? What did he do? He wrote a catechism. He established schools. He argued and argued and argued that fathers and mothers should send their kids to school and learn how to read and write and the like. I mean, there's something to be said about this, right? That even though Luther thought that the end of the world was coming in his lifetime even, nevertheless, he laid down things that would last for 100,000, hopefully 100,000 more years.
Right. And I would also say this is that shows that one, he wasn't selling the farm about this, but he was living in a crazy time, and there were plenty of Anabaptists who were saying, that we're saying this is the end of the world, sell all your things, let's form a compound, and doing all sorts of crazy stuff that Luther would get blamed for some of that, but he had nothing to do with.
I mean, I am always up for starting a compound, but, just because I think it would be fun. But I think
you're in the right state, brother.
But yeah, I mean, this tells us how we as Christians should actually look at the world, right? We should live every day in two ways. One, that Christ is coming back at the end of the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
The second way is to live that, Christ will come back in 1,000 years, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what should we be doing? We should be building institutions and the like to keep this faith going, right? And to grow and to thrive, while at the same time living, not hedging our bets or pulling our punches, I guess.
And I would say too.
And I mean, I think about it this way: you look at the Concordia systems. 5 Concordias have closed in the last 10 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're losing our institutions Now, we can debate whether those things are right or not, or if they were insufficient or unsalvageable. That's fine. But what new institutions are we making? What are we doing for our great, 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 great grandchildren? Right? I mean,
Yeah, that's right.
so, I mean, I think we have to have this dual purpose in mind that, yeah, Jesus could come back at the end of the show, which I hope he does. Then Peter wouldn't have to edit it. But nevertheless, right, we need to be building.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of reminds me of one of my favorite poems that I've been learning right now, and I think it actually does give a lot of hope. It's Ulysses by Lord Alfred Tennyson. At the end of it, this is the aged Achilles talking to his crew, and he says, "Though much is taken, much abides, and though we are not now the strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are, one equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield." So the church may be made weak by time and by fate, but she must be strong in will. Because it is the will, the will trusts in Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And Christ has been raised from the dead. That's what we're celebrating today.
And all the things that we would say that when we think of times when the church was strong, all those things that kept it strong and made it strong still exist. We are still, the Word of God still exists. The resurrection, its power still exists. The power of baptism still exists. The fact that we are created in the image of God, although the image in some ways has been lost, but nonetheless, we are still created to be His servants and created in a way that has a real impact on the world around us. We are created in that nature.
So, I mean, I guess that's my Easter message is, though much is taken, much abides. Our congregations may be very old. There might not be a lot of kids. We see the supposed death of these congregations, right? We see congregations and people being spiritually killed, not by Romans, but by secularism, by evil teachings, by the cares and the lusts of this world. And yet, Jesus can certainly raise His church from the dead, just as He Himself rose.
Yeah, and it tends to go in cycles, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So, let's take hope. Though much is taken, much abides. And it's true. We have the one thing needful. And that should make us very happy. That should make us rejoice. So we shouldn't go away, as the Mark 16 text says, afraid and not saying anything to anyone. Right?
Right.
So
right. The way I've worded it before in the sermon is you see the difference, for example, in Mary, in the disciples, how the resurrection changed everything for them, right? Mm-hmm. And to live and sometimes I think when we deal with all the things that life gives us, I think I might have talked a little. I don't remember how I worded it when I talked about your sermon,
Mm-hmm.
but kind of living as though Jesus is still in the tomb.
Yeah, right. Like, you've got so many assaults upon the church today where people just sort of assume that, these things are not living but are dead. And how often do we adopt those same behaviors and when we interact with, the people in the world, or react with just each other?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and the resurrection is a scary thing. People don't do that. Right? I mean,
yeah,
that's
kind
the
of
thing.
the whole
is
point. Yeah.
Like, people don't do that. It's people are terrified. I mean, Jesus appears to the disciples time in and time again. It's like, it is scary because it is a fundamental reversal from how things are supposed to be.
Yeah. Do you know how
that's amazing?
One reason it's scary is when people say, "Oh yeah, Grandma is watching me from heaven," and like, I hope not.
Yeah, can you imagine if Grandma suddenly walked through the door?
Right.
Yeah, they didn't really believe it. Then Grandma slaps him and says, "What have you been doing with your life?"
Yeah, Grandpa's saying, "Are you watching a dog show on TV?" What's wrong with you people?
And yet, and this is the thing, is Jesus is fundamentally, like, he is very, very different. And this is why he doesn't want Mary to touch him, right? Don't touch me, right? Because you can't, like, this isn't the same. This isn't like Lazarus. This isn't like, the nobleman's girl or the nobleman's boy who died. Like, these, like, it's different. Jesus even says in the Gospel of Luke, like, these are the things I said when I was still with you. And if you're reading, you're like, well, what in the world is he talking about? Well, Jesus is not with them in the way that he was before. It's different.
And that don't touch me. I mean, before his death, he was a very tactile person, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Right? A woman washing people's feet, a woman anointing his feet with oil, him making saliva and making a man to see, making mud out of it. All sorts of ways that...
sticking his finger in people's ears to help to make them hear, drawing the kids together. Yeah.
Right. Even the Lord's Supper itself, take, eat, and drink. This cup is a new covenant in my blood. Yeah. But there in the resurrected body, I think it even means something that she could touch him. You know what I mean? That the fact that it was a real body.
Mm-hmm.
Different, but it was a real body.
Yeah. And like, because she wanted things to go back, she wanted the resurrection to be a mulligan, but it's not a mulligan. It's a different reality. And this is what all believers look forward to in the resurrection, which is why, like, we should actually be singing hymns out at the graveside when we bury people, right? Like, this body in the grave we lay, there to await the solemn day, when God himself shall bid it rise, to mount triumphant in the skies.
And to all those people say, we don't believe because it never happens. Well, that's what makes it so special, you doofus.
That's the point of a miracle.
Right. They're by nature miraculous. If it happened every day, guess what? It wouldn't be a miracle.
Yeah.
We could talk about not seeing and believing in a couple weeks, I guess.
Yeah. Quasimodo geniti. My favorite Sunday. Not
Victor,
my favorite, but it's one of them.
That's not a character from Star Trek, by the way.
Oh, I thought it was a hunchback guy, French guy.
Yeah. Yeah, because they found him on the steps of Notre Dame on Quasimodo geniti.
There you go.
So for all you Victor Hugo fans out there.
And we know there are a lot of them.
Well, there should be. Well, who here doesn't like Les Mis? I mean, let's be honest. Really? Nobody?
Okay.
I mean, I like Les Mis, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Vicar, for throwing me a bone. That's fine.
I haven't watched it.
Well, I'll give you.
I haven't watched it.
Okay. Is that movie ADHD friendly? Was it a musical too?
It was originally it was a novel.
Yeah, originally it was a novel, and now most people would know it as a musical these days. Wolverine was Jean Valjean.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Hugh
I actually
Jackman.
did see it. I did see it.
Just not at the same time.
Right. Well, I saw it in the balcony.
That would be a cool movie. Like
that would be an ADHD friendly Les Mis.
Yeah.
So
I don't know, anything with miserable in the title. I don't know. No, but I actually did see the movie in our local theater with my wife in the balcony.
Ooh.
Yeah. So
man, pretty high class.
Yeah.
I do think one thing I do want to bring up is like the empty tomb is not enough.
Right, it's the resurrection that counts, not necessarily the empty tomb.
Because they all and what I'm thinking is like they need words because they all go to the empty tomb. They don't understand what in the world is happening. The gospel the disciple whom Jesus loved says that it's, that he believed. That's what he says, right? Mm-hmm. But neither one of them understood that the scripture said that Jesus must rise from the dead. And Mary, of course, takes it like, oh, well, somebody just grave robbed and they took his body away. It actually needs to be preached. And I think this is a good thing to make the kind of the distinction between the reality of the resurrection. Okay, it happened. Like all of the world's sins are atoned for, that the resurrection is God's absolution on the world. but it doesn't help anybody if it's not preached.
Right. And what saddens me is how much this will be preached from pulpits this very morning when this comes out, right? Is whether Jesus actually rose from the dead doesn't really matter, because it just teaches us that we live lives of resurrections, of new beginnings, and blah, 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 blah. Come on. Really?
Everybody's the worst. Except for Jesus. He's the best.
Happy Easter.
Yeah. It's like going to a funeral and saying, preaching a funeral sermon, whether so-and-so will actually rise from the dead is immaterial.
Immaterial.
The important thing is that, we move on and
that they remain alive in our memories, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I just threw up a little bit in my mouth.
You're welcome.
Put it in Easter egg, bro.
Oh, gross.
Honorable mention.
Oh, you gave me an idea, though. How about an empty Easter egg? What does it mean? Well, I've got some words for you.
Yeah. It means you were too cheap to put something in there.
I'm sure the kid will listen to you. Yeah.
What does it mean? It means I like my stepdad better.
All right. So what are we doing now?
Before we wrap up, I want to mention Hannah sent in an email. She says, faithful Catholics have abortions. That's a sign she saw in a neighbor's window from Catholics for Choice. At first glance, she says, I thought it read, faithful Catholics hate abortions, a sentiment I was surprised to see expressed in my neighborhood. Have abortions makes more demographic sense, but obviously much less theological sense. You're in the minority podcast, Mom, Hannah.
Yeah, I would say if that's your sentiment, the closest thing to faithful Catholics are the ones being imported.
Also, what does it mean to be a faithful Catholic these days? I mean, everything is so scattered and watered down. What does it actually mean to be a faithful Catholic?
Right. Well, I would say this, right? I will reword that and say that there are faithful Lutherans who have had them, who need the grace of God.
Yeah.
Right. But they would also then say what? It was sinful.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is, if you want to talk about every Sunday in Lent, we have been talking about and seeing how anything good that Jesus dealt with his enemies called evil. And that's a constant theme of calling something good evil and evil good. And there is a sign of that. I mean, what then does it mean to be Catholic? I don't know.
Depending on who you ask, that means that Jesus isn't the only way.
I don't even know what the point of... Help me out, Berg. What is the point of even being Catholic? Like, what if that's your understanding, what is the purpose of the church? That's what I don't understand with all of these movements. The reason why I think all these movements are destined to evaporate in some way as we know and as we see it is we're coming at a time where who is going to be willing to die for that church? No one. You think so?
I think so.
I think they'd be willing to kill for that church. But if your life on the line, you don't really have the gospel. It is just sort of like woke platitudes. I don't think that is the kind of Christianity that lasts in any kind of heat.
Well, and
right.
I think we saw that in the 17th century. Vicar, did you ever see that movie Silence?
If I did, I don't remember it.
Is that a Chaplin film?
Not a Chaplin film.
Bad joke.
Yep, but a funny joke. It's what is it? Koppel. Oh, he's done a bunch of really good ones. But anyway, it's about these Jesuit priests in medieval Japan, and they're forced to convert to Buddhism. And it's like, well, either convert or die. And he tries to justify it to himself that, well, if I pretend to convert to Buddhism, right, if I actually, renounce Christ, right? I can do more good. I can save these other people, blah, 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 right? Well, what ended up happening? I mean, Christianity became extinct in Japan, right? So, so in that way, I think the liberal or more secularistic parts of the church won't suffer martyrdom, because what we see now is that the Jesuits are some of the most liberal Roman Catholics around, right?
So
Other parts will, though. I mean, it's not like it's a monolithic. The Roman Catholic Church isn't monolithic,
right?
You know, there are more conservatives, there are more liberals, but the thing is like what unites them. It's not theology, it's not the Bible, it is the magisterium, it's the Pope. The Pope unites them. And as long as you are submissive to the Pope, you're a Roman Catholic.
Yes. But is that submissive to the Pope, the sign?
Well, it's a sign of the Antichrist, if you want to go down that route. I mean, you know.
That's true. But my point I'm trying to make is, okay, let's say I'm going to a church where, going back to it doesn't really matter whether or not the resurrection happened. We're going to celebrate our abortions. And this is what we're all about, okay? And then you're asking members, okay, we need to actually support this church, right? People have to give a portion of their income to keep everything going. What is there of value that people ultimately will be willing to give?
Well, unless your local congregation is supporting this kind of stuff. I mean,
right.
Some congregations do. I mean, why is the United Church of Christ still in existence, right? Because generations ago, they left a bunch of money to it. And these have been in endowment funds, and they continue to grow, right? This is why the Episcopalians are so rich. And these Roman Catholics, you know, are, I would say, probably a more fringe minority, okay? Because the Pope doesn't believe in abortions. I mean, even theologically, you know, unless you believe Aquinas' thing on the quickening, that the soul doesn't enter the fetus until a certain point, you could maybe use that old sort of medieval sophistry to get your point across. But let's be honest, they are not faithful Catholics. I bet they don't attend Mass every Sunday. The reason they are the way that they are is because the labor movement joined with the leftist movement, and that became the Democratic Party. Because where Hannah is from, in the Twin Cities, there are a lot of Irish there. The Irish were treated very terribly, and so they joined labor movements. These weren't godly labor movements because they eventually got caught up in the Democratic Party, who was for labor. And so, you know, working for better wages and that sort of stuff, that's great, right? That's what those movements were originally supposed to be. But then it got attached to other things that are not about labor, right?
Yeah, you have the same thing that used to be that a good portion of farmers, for example, were more Democrat than Republican.
Yeah, I mean, in Minnesota, there's the DFL, right? The Democratic Farmers League, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when that party was founded, I want to say in the 20s, I don't quite remember all the way, but, you know, when it was founded, prices were low. So farmers tried to, you know, bargain for better prices. They tried to form co-ops and all that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's the problem, is like you get into a thing where you're trying, you know, into a group that's trying to, I don't know, make it so you don't have to work 12 to 14 hours a day so that you can actually have a livable wage, so that your 10 and 12-year-old children can go to school until they're 10 or 12 years old and not start working in the factory or in the mines. That's originally what it was. But unfortunately, that got attached to other things. And so...
And it's interesting that you kind of mentioned that a lot of these churches are funded by endowment and that kind of thing. I wonder, the sad thing is, like, when some of those endowments were given, they were kind of given in good faith that, like you mentioned, building a church for generations to come.
Yeah.
And that's what they were seeking to do. And many of these things are standing for things that they wouldn't have wanted.
Exactly. I mean, so if you're going to give an endowment to your congregation so that way the preaching of the gospel can continue there, like, great. But make sure that that's what that is designated for.
Yeah. All right. Well, that sounds like an Easter episode.
Classic Clerical Errors Easter episode.
Why was that too dark? No. I love where our discussions go. We were answering an email, so if we apply what we've already said about the resurrection, that there's still quite a bit alive. As Berg, how did you word that?
Though much is taken, much abides.
Much abides. So, all right. Thank you for listening. This is Bollhagen.
This is Berg.
And this is Vicar.
And may your Easter eggs be filled with joy.
And nuts.
Thank you for joining us. This podcast is available on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Questions, thoughts, concerns? You can contact us on Facebook at facebook.com/Clerical Errors Podcast, on Twitter at Clerical Errors P for podcast, or email us at feedback@clericalerrors.org. Thanks for listening to Clerical Errors. See you next time.